you get really engrossed in them, that kind of thing. So we're beginning with one game that I have a lot of fond memories with, called Magi Nation. And go ahead and get the pictures. Here it is. So this was Magi Nation. It was a Game Boy Color game. Um, in it can easily be misconstrued as a Pokemon clone when it's actually not. Um, it belongs to I wouldn't call it an obscure card game, but more like it was a very localized card game. It wasn't around a very long time. Magi Nation Duel was a trading card game from 2000 to 2002, I think it was, based in Canada. And the premise behind it was kind of a card game that was meant to be more like an intermediate game between Pokemon TCG and Magic the Gathering, um, which the creators thought would be too hard of a gap to cross. And the actually funny thing is that's pretty much exactly what I did. So I probably would have been the target demographic for um, this game had Yu-Gi-Oh not exploded in popularity, which I think really kind of more filled the gap than Magi Nation could have. And it's not just a card game. Actually, there were several uh, video games. So really quick, here's what a card looked like. Um, And one of the big distinctions with the art style, particularly, was they're kind of an American manga style uh, going here. And what you may not be aware of in the early 2000s, because this is 20 fucking years ago, Christ almighty, is that in the 90s, anime was getting really, really big, right? We had Evangelion, we had Trigun, we had Cowboy Bebop. We had Gundam. There's a lot. Dragon Ball Z, of course. Like, there's a lot of shows that were exploding on the American market. Um, in the 2000s, the early 2000s, when the manga market first started popping up and becoming pretty big, and you'd start seeing shelves of manga in Borders or Barnes and Noble, or the other uh, bookstores that are long defunct. I've forgotten. Um, so therein lies this there's this era, I guess, of on the Western side, artists who wanted to emulate that style of art, of manga art, but had a kind of more of a comic book aesthetic to it. Um, and you can kind of see. Let me pull a few more of these up here. We'll kind of show them all together. Um, so we'll get Tony Jones back up here. And put this guy. You here? Yeah, here we go. It kind of stems from two things. One, it kind of felt a bit more amateur what than the comic book industry was putting out, like DC and Marvel and Image Comics and all of that. So there was the kind of that trend there, where and a manga honestly uh has that distinction of pull that out too. It has that distinction that um it is homemade and usually kind of amateur. I'm going to amateur in a good way, like not amateur bad, but just manga artists usually didn't have as much uh college training. They would often just be artists who drew most of their lives and then continue to do so into their adult lives. And that's how their industry really began. But it had a lot more soul to it too. I feel like And that's really where I think a lot of people really meshed with manga artists over comic book artists or American artists. And on the American side, you had these artists who were trying to kind of really nail that heart that the Japanese artists were able to convey, but weren't quite able to do so because they were still trying to make that art work through the lens of comic book consumers, you know. And so it kind of it stems from that. It also stems from this was also in the very early era of like digital art, um, and what do you call it? Like MS Paint, and all of that stuff. And it's like you would have these very basic, uh, basically drawn, basically painted, or basically colored and inked drawings that would then have these overblown um, digital effects applied to them. Like I'm thinking like Ken Penders and the Archie uh, Sonic comics kind of had this kind of same issue, and they didn't quite mesh. And if anything, it kind of made the limitations of the art stand out a little bit more because of the over reliance on the computer generated effects to make it look more professional and clean, you know, that kind of thing. So it was this combination, and honestly, like I'm describing this because this may not even be the interpretation today. Like if you look at some of the artwork for Magi Nation, you go through the cards or anything like that, you may think it's fine, you know. But that was just kind of the vibe of the time was this is not from Japan. This is just some dude in his basement in Ontario, Canada, drawing these drawings, or from like in fucking Montana, or like some shit like that. Um, and it kind of had this whole like the whole deviant art era, you know, of like these artists who are trying to break out and trying to make a name for themselves, but never were really able to do that because of the stigma surrounding the unprofessional nature of how they made their art and where they made like where they posted, you know, that kind of thing. So I haven't gone through all of the cards before. I do like. Let me pull this guy up and make it a bit bigger. I really like the bar back. This is the back of the cards, and I really like that. It has kind of a Books of Magic vibe to it, you know. It's really interesting. So that was the big part of this. This game was more or less based on the card game and used the characters and the monsters and all that from that, rather than being a full blown Pokemon clone. Um, and the other thing big about this series was it wasn't just a card game, wasn't just a video game. There was actually a TV show, and let me pull that up here. And it ran pretty briefly. It was produced by a company called Cookie Jar. It was a um, what? Go. It was a Canadian broadcasting production company that was partnered with the CBC. So they would make these TV shows and then put them on CBC. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, I'm pretty sure it was regional more than anything. Like supposedly this was on Kids WB um, in like 2007, which is a really weird year because that's also when WB got bought out by CW apparently, and also they closed out their kids daytime TV show block. So this was like at that very end point, um, and this probably was one of those shows like I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but it doesn't seem like it probably have the best production value. You know, a lot of these TV shows that were on like the local cable broadcasting or like on the local stations during the daytime, They weren't the highest quality. But one interesting thing about this particular image I found, I was just looking for like images to talk about, and apparently it was on Jetix. I don't know. That's a bit strange to me because nothing that I read actually indicates that. Um, and I think there was two seasons, and I think they released one on the internet. So like this isn't an obscure franchise. They had enough pull for the trading card game that they're able to get multiple video games and an animated TV show made. It's just more or less, I think it's Canadian, and there isn't a whole lot of like attention put on Canadian culture. So that's what that is. Other things I have that are very interesting, and I'm going to try my best to make this work. Um, so let's see. There were apparently three video games. There's the one we're going to play tonight, Magi Nation. There was a sequel that never came out on the Game Boy Color. It was supposed to, and I have something really cool for that. But apparently, it didn't come out for that. But it was fuck. What were those things called? A Pocket PC um, game. It's just a lot of this stuff. I think it sounds like they had a lot of heart and they had a lot of like good intentions for what they wanted to do with the franchises, but it just didn't work out for one reason or another. Okay, but this is really cool, and it's gonna be kind of hard to see for a second. Let me just figure out how I can make this functional. All right, so no. Here we go. Okay. Transform, stretch. No. Fuck. How do we zoom in? Hold on a minute. I just want to zoom in on this page. That's all I want to do. How do I do that? Yeah, there we go. There we go. So this was the sequel game that was supposed to come out, but never did. And this is really cool because this is where I first. This is the exact article I read about it, and I didn't expect it to come out. Like I didn't expect to find this, but I just happened to come across it. This was from Nintendo Power number 151. And it was like December 2001 or something like that. And they had like a full, you've seen it, like a full page of stuff, right? All about it, like a whole bunch of screenshots. So this game was basic. It looks like it was done, right? And you had a whole new character and all these new cool things going on. And it never came out. I guess I don't think they were able to finish it for the GVC, so they just kind of made it into like a mobile phone game, which was like this was 2000 and something, like 2003 or 4, like odd like that. you know. Um, so largely, it seems like as the franchise, it started up in 2000, kind of just dried up by 2008. Was I think the last point. They finished the episodes for the second season of the show and put them online in 2010. Then was also this, which is kind of cool. There was a browser game that was apparently going on for a while. It kind of looks like those kiddie games. Like what was that thing my students really like to watch or like they like to play? Prodigy? It looks like Prodigy to me, or like Neopets. Kind of that vibe. As far as I know, it's defunct. If I can find like if there's like a private server continuing or something like that, we might try and might try that out one day. I don't know. We'll see. Um, but that was around apparently in again like not 2010, but about before that. And that's really all of Magi Nation as far as I know. Um, so how do we tie it back in HGC? So these um the Game Boy game largely uh it's kind of like it sits on its own. It's a pretty good game. Um it's memorable for me for a lot of different reasons. We'll go through all those as we play. Um but uh I think it is important to like kind of it's this own distinct entity in all of this is what I'm trying to say. It's like it's not a Pokemon game, right? It's close to a Pokemon game. It's a capture monsters and use them to fight styled RPG. Like Dragon Warrior monsters, like Pokemon, like SMT. Um, but it's also distinct from the card game in that it has its own battle mechanics, and it's a pretty unique take uh, on the whole process. So let's go ahead and get started. Kind of see what I mean.